About a year ago, we were on the ground to cover the Mountain Valley Pipeline, but there was also a pipeline, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, a totally unnecessary, totally dangerous natural gas pipeline going through Virginia, North Carolina, and I believe Virginia, North Carolina, and parts of West Virginia. And shocker, they were going, because with natural gas pipelines, it's not just the pipeline. It is massive pressure stations, where those pressure stations that help keep the gas at a high pressure as it travels along in the pipeline. So they were building in a historically black community, a majority black community, a lot of older senior citizens in this black community. So this big, massive compressor station was basically being dumped in the backyard of a church with freed slaves, where freed slaves are buried. That compressor station, which is going to emit methane and all sorts of toxic chemicals into this historically black community where freed slaves are buried, they won the battle. They won the battle against this oil company, against this energy company, because the final permits were denied because of the environmental racism. Because of the environmental racism, the permits were denied. Well, shockingly, the U.S. Supreme Court has announced that it will hear arguments on the Atlantic Coast Pipeline early next year. Because, the Supreme Court works for corporate America too. The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to review a Fourth Circuit Court decision revoking a key permit for Atlantic Coast Pipeline construction, a decision that effectively halted construction of the project. Atlantic Coast Pipeline spokesperson Aaron Ruby called the court's decision to review the case, quote, a very encouraging sign and provides a clear path forward to resolve the important issue. According to Ruby, arguments will be heard early next year with the decision expected by June. Ruby classified the pipeline as necessary for the economic vitality, environmental health, and energy security. So, the Supreme Court basically going to essentially be willing to reverse this denial of the permit. In a joint statement, the Southern Environmental Law Center and the Sierra Club said, we will defend the lower court's decision in this case. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline is a dangerous, costly, and unnecessary project, and we won't stand by while Duke and Dominion Energy try to force it on our public lands, threatening people's health, endangered species, iconic landscapes, and clean water along the way. Quote, since construction on the ACP began last year, 7 crucial permits have been vacated, resulting in a halt to construction since December of 2018. Dominion Energy proposed this pipeline in 2014. In the years since, the energy landscape has changed dramatically, and we now know that this $7.8 billion pipeline is costly, unneeded, dangerous, and will only add to our greenhouse gas emission problems and burden Duke and Dominion customers with the cost for decades to come, the Southern Environmental Law Center said. So, this is definitely a story we are going to go back out and cover. But for those of you that are new subscribers, because we covered this a while ago, I want you to know what the potential victims of this pipeline look like. Again, very similar to Standing Rock, very similar to the lead contamination in East Chicago. It seems that a lot of these issues, a lot of these pipelines, a lot of these uranium mines, a lot of these terrible, toxic, planet-destroying projects are being dumped on the reservations or the backyards of poor black and native and brown communities. I want to show you, and he does talk a little slow, but God is his words powerful. Here's part of the conversation I had at the church, Union Hill Church, with a descendant, we think, a descendant of a freed slave. There are freed slaves buried in this church where they are putting the compression station in the backyard of this church in a historically black community. Let's take a look at part of my interview from last year.
Sad part about it all is Dominion ACP cannot guarantee there will not be any leaks. As a matter of fact, they don't guarantee anything.
All pipelines leak. It's not really a matter of if, it's just when it happens.
Exactly. And what we are looking at, what we're facing, when it leaks, then our water is automatically contaminated. Water is life, and we depend on underground water source for humans as well as our animals. I'm a farmer as well. I raise cattle, and we have several creeks on the property. And we use a well system for our water for our home. As a matter of fact, all the people in the area, all our neighbors, same way. So when our water, underground water source become contaminated, then we have no other source.
To do these kinds of projects that they'll always put in locations where there is little representation. People are basically poor. They're not considered so much in the mainstream. We're in a rural area. There's some educated folk there, but the ratio. And what they also did was, now federal law says that they can't really come there in our area, but how they skirted around it was they took the population of our community and spread it throughout the whole county. And so instead of being, they diluted us by, I knew that number right off the top of my head, but I think it was well over 20%.
Well, I was listening before I came to some of the reporting that's been done on this, and the oil companies, they were surveying how many people live within a specific, yardage or specific area, and they said, there's like 25 people within a couple hundred yards or something like that. Not a couple hundred yards, but there was 25 people within a few couple blocks. And then a reporter came around and did it, and it was 166.
Right.
So it seems like they purposely, basically tried to make it like not a lot of people live here.
Purposely and intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
Even all of the reports that Dominion, and when I speak of Dominion, it always represents the industry. They purposely and intentionally dilute the numbers, and it's misrepresentation.
So that was the first video was a resident of Union Hill who, it's hard to know for sure, but believes he's a descendant of freed slaves. That church we spoke to him at has freed slaves buried right next to it, like right in the backyard. And the compressor station for the Union Hill pipeline, which again will emit mass methane and other contaminants into this poor black community, senior citizens mostly, is basically on top of a graveyard with freed slaves. America. United Corporations of America, that is. So the Supreme Court now willing to hear this, meaning willing to possibly reverse a lower court's decision to stop this pipeline. This is why, systemically, the whole country is corrupt. From the political, from the executive body, Trump, yes, corrupt. From the judicial to Congress. It's all corrupt. That is why you need radical political revolution. Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.